All right, we are rolling. Kairos and I,
Hello, friends.
thanks for joining us here. It was a bit of an impromptu live session. We thought we'd put some heads together and get some of your heads in this huddle and talk about our radio appearance coming up on TNT Radio this Saturday at 6 a.m. Pacific.
Yes, both of us have been approached by an international radio station that has regular programming on a variety of subjects. They reached out to us. They've noticed the work that we're doing and the way that we're presenting our material, and we've asked to be guests on their show. A live interview and roundtable discussion similar to what you're going to see right now, but with a host that is very interested in the subject and is going to give us a platform to hear us out.
Yeah, and a host that's not so familiar with the subject. They use the word Tartaria as an entry point into this research, right?
So they're going to be asking us what we understand Tartaria to be, what we recognize as a concept, and so we want to be able to show them or explain to them that this is a region that is shown on some of the earliest maps. It's depicted, it's mentioned. They have a flag that has been seen, coats of arms, representations that are still evident on buildings, so it needs to be addressed as a legitimate thing. And then we're starting to find that the astounding architecture is still existing in many cities. We can go look at them, and we are baffled because no one can build them now.
Yeah, and it's a realm-wide thing. It's not isolated to a specific region. So we're extending the concept of Tartaria across the realm, really.
I'm going to open up my my chat window over here. We were opening up this chat briefly. Many researchers that have been on discussions with us for the last couple of years are here, and we want to make sure that we are touching on these prime subjects and being able to discuss it in a way that is going to appeal to the largest audience. So we're welcoming and going to monitor the chat. We're only going to be here for about a half an hour. Just wanted to give you a heads up and give you an opportunity to share out the broadcast of this radio show, possibly on your channel. We'd love to get as large as audience as possible.
Yeah, because we're introducing it to probably an audience that is not all that familiar with the concept, right? For the most part, I would say. So, entry points, I guess, into the topic is what we're targeting. There's so much to talk about. We got to try and pin down a few general concepts, I think, that are easily relatable or more easily relatable.
Right, and I think what most people are familiar with are the older photographs of some of these amazing structures, either in their hometown, or they may go on vacation and see the historical sites. They're their state capitals, they're their small communities. They've actually unknowingly very familiar with these structures all their lives, but never paid them the attention they deserve to be able to ask these important questions on how they're possible.
Yeah, and then more and more people are starting to see it in this light. And I think the World's Fairs are really a good entry point, and we are going to talk about that a bit, aren't we, Kairos?
Right. We are going to mention the fact that there were so many. They were built in record time, and trying to put together a real believable logistical timeline from a builder's perspective. That's where the two of us are joining forces. We both have a lot of experience in construction and understand what it takes to get materials to a job site and being productive and not making mistakes and producing a very good product. We know what's involved, and there really are no shortcuts. Once the structure is above one floor, it's no longer temporary. It's something that has to be self-supporting, and these structures were magnificent. And of course, we're going to have to mention the Doors for Giants at some point, because they're in every community. There's no way around it. So it's I'm really going to be interested to see the approach, the questioning. I think these presenters are very professional, so I think we're going to have a very comfortable platform and good discussion. I don't think we have anything to be worried about. We're both very confident in our material.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're going to touch on the fires as well, the destruction and devastation that went on around that same period of time, through the reset lens, right? Which I think
Correct. And so because when we start to determine how many actual fires there were that were put forward to students of history through the school years, we see that it's really no major city was free from the destruction. And we want to know, are the dates reliable? Were the fires truly spread out over that long period that's being described to us? Or could it have all been in a very short period of time and then dispersed amongst the population to lessen suspicions of most of the cities being destroyed simultaneously? It's difficult because it's hard to verify the history that's presented, because everything that's being shown is now falling into hearsay. We cannot speak to anyone living or speak to any relatives that knew anyone living that told them these things. So we're taking people's word. So making these extreme examinations, and I think you said you've been researching continuously for going on 4 years now, into your
close
third
to.
late. Yes.
Yeah.
And that really changes you when you
Mm-hmm.
start to see the patterns. And I was telling you how much I appreciate your presentations, because the patterns show up in every time you show us. Those courthouse presentations, we're starting to see that courthouses are looking similar now from city to city. They're not so unique. They're very similar. They have a pattern to them. I just noticed the courthouse in Visalia, California looks like Napa, California. I just saw the old photo. Very similar. Onion dome, large pergola, portholes, tech.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and we've been trained not to really care about our past or to cherish it. It seems like something, in the name of progress, we must look forward, but we're not encouraged to look back. And I think there's probably reasons for that. They say that history is written by the victors. I think that it's a pretty true statement. So I get the dog here.
You're right.
Yeah. So what we're doing in this community is we are looking, and we're also not taking the recorded evidence, like the written word, at face value, because what we're seeing with our eyes does not match what we're being told. There are large discrepancies, vast discrepancies there. Right.
You're right. And when we start to notice the locations where some of the buildings that are so destroyed are being found in relation to where the current population lives, it starts to get it's a repetitive example for us with the mud flooding, the buried civilizations that are just poking through, and then that leads us to this vast underground that's being found in all of these cities, which turns out could very well just be buried previously above ground structures, is what it seems, and then various degrees of heat cataclysm damage along with it.
There's a controlling force here, I think, that is hiding a cataclysm and destruction of what we once were, or what was once here. And their existence and their power relies on us not knowing that what once was. They have to hide the existence of it from us. People always say, "Why the lie?" I see that a lot in my comment sections. That's why, because their power relies on that deception and us not knowing the truth.
Right, and we're going to have a nice experience, because they're going to encourage us to speak together on some of the things that we've been researching, and it comes to find out that most of the things that we are researching, we tend to agree on. I don't know if there's any areas where we're debating at this time. We're
Mm-hmm.
pretty even on the ideas. This force that is keeping us from knowing our history of our ancestors and our society and our potential.
Mm-hmm.
It almost seems like computer controlled element.
Yeah, artificial, yeah,
It is
soulless and
now. It
definitely soulless.
may not have always been that way, but we've fallen into the type of world where most people are perfectly content to communicate with their citizens with a device as a mediator. They're texting, they're sending messages, voice messages, face-to-face contact, where one is reading your body language and listening to your voice and really getting to detect if this person has any credibility. It's a lost art. People don't prefer that communication, so they're getting their information from the media, which is a presentation, and we're coming to find that most of what's being presented cannot be verifiably true. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times we're detecting that it's mostly presented intentionally false, and
Mm-hmm.
we're discovering that all of that together as well. It's very clear we're able to see the difference between real and CGI and models and various artwork and drawings and photo manipulation. It's becoming easier. We've seen the pattern so many times that we're not really surprised anymore. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, and I think we're in a stage of their control where they are desperately attempting to tighten that noose of control, and in that same breath, we are becoming more aware of how overarching their deception really is. I think we're in this weird, you know, scales balancing time. The harder they push to completely take control over us, the more we become able to see how vast their deception is and get closer to the truth. Maybe, it's an interesting time to be alive, I think.
I agree. It seems that we actually are free in a lot of respects, but we're convinced to live in a way that is not free. So a lot of our life decisions, we make these choices, but a lot of them revolve around our complying with government mandates or issues or regulations, the various structures that are woven into society. We're forced to live with, and that takes a huge amount of our own personal time and resources, and it makes it difficult to investigate or think or ask questions. We're very tied up in our day-to-day activities to earn a living, and that's almost an insult to say that, I think, to our fellow friends. Earning a living, you have to somehow find a way to pay to live. And I think that what we're seeing is that that wasn't the case in these old cities. I don't think they
It's not
lived.
possible. The level of
They,
artistry that we're witnessing is it's not possible to
that's
exist
correct.
and build that way. And I think
And that's where some of the narratives, when we find these older structures with small populations, people, unfortunately, that are not in construction are ignorant in the way that buildings are constructed and the time and the skills and the number of years you have to have before you can accomplish certain finished work. So when you look at these cowboy towns, apparently everyone was a master craftsman. Everyone that lived in the community, but even if that was the case, obviously being sarcastic, that's still not enough people to build these places.
yeah,
If
and well, then you factor in the other parts of the historical narrative, like the cholera epidemics and the wars. It really didn't. What we're told, it really didn't seem like they had time to build anything, of any sort of beauty. That's for sure.
it's some part of it makes me nervous when I see the the lack of maintenance in the current structures that are being used, and then the quality of the buildings of the new construction and the new infrastructure projects, the roadways. I mean, I don't know what your town is like, but I live in a very wealthy community in California, in Napa County,
Mm-hmm.
and the roads here are terrible. There's potholes everywhere,
Same
and
here.
it's just, it doesn't even make sense. So we're looking back at these cities. They're incredible, and they apparently were able to get along so well. They were turning out masterpieces, and these are perfect buildings, though. That's another part of the question.
Mm-hmm.
Why are they all perfect? We don't
Mm-hmm.
see, nothing is perfect today. Everything we see today is garbage and has having water damage in less than 20 years and having to be torn down.
Yeah. Yeah. And we also we're going to touch on the technologies, hidden technologies, especially transportation wise, with the dirigible or blimp air travel and the trolley
Yeah,
car narrative. The trolley
right.
car narrative is one of the worst for me. The horse drawn trolley cars. I think that's not very creative.
Here in my small town, which in the late 1800s, they did have a electric streetcar system that was very advanced. It went through many of the neighborhoods, and it had connecting points to northern and southern communities. And this was supposedly a all electric railway. And I don't understand the story of why it was abandoned. I believe most of the infrastructure is still underground, the city streets. I don't know where they were getting the power from. I'm having a hard time finding these old world power plants that were all
Mm-hmm.
springing up together, as well as once communities were going exclusively to petroleum based vehicles, the emergence of all the gas stations and service industry to immediately support that as it came into existence so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Just like being able to supply everything needed to build the railroads and all the bridges, the amazing amount of smelting and forging and mining to create steel
Yeah.
from
Not to mention the dirt work, the need to build.
so much earthwork, so much grading.
Yeah.
If you've been to enough job sites and you've seen the heavy equipment and you know what it takes when there's earth compaction and when there's gravel and when there's land preparations, it's a very long process and it's very tedious, and it just involves just yards after thousands of cubic yards of earth.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys
And
were building perfectly level roadbed for the railways by the
yeah.
thousands of the miles.
It
So
requires compaction too, which we use hydraulic or whatever it might be. And look, we see a lot of these photos from a year after the building was said to have been constructed, and it's got perfect sidewalks and streets all around it, looking fairly old too. I think that's a part of the narrative too that they're a little sloppy on is the actual infrastructure around the building itself. They didn't really factor that into a lot of the timelines that we've been given for some of these structures.
it seems that many are noticing, you mentioned the airships. So many of these buildings were actually designed to accommodate, and many of the existing old world structures, they have the airship provision removed now many
Mhm.
times. And then we
Mhm.
see the
Yeah.
older structures. So I think that mode of transportation was much more common, but I think it's the type of transportation that cannot be allowed for members of the public to use because you can see too well. You can observe what's going on um, if you have free transportation, which we do not have. People
No.
like to imagine we can do and go where we please, but we're very limited.
Oh yeah. For many people, an airplane trip is a handful of times in their life they may take one. For many people, really, it's a
Right.
very special thing. So it's
But those routes are where the jets go. That's not it's
yeah,
not just up to the pilot. He doesn't just get to go wherever he wants. It's very strict,
yeah.
very very strict. So but people are observing, and I find it very encouraging to find so many that are spending they're spending their most valuable possession, their time to learn and
Hmm.
then to compare. I have a I have a saying that I think is true, and I appreciate you know working with me right now, and that is collaboration equals wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's true. Um, People speaking and exchanging ideas, being patient and kindly considering an open mind. So I think that's why this opportunity for us with this radio show is important. It seems that the producers they value the research we've been doing, and they'd like to introduce the topic to their audience and possibly learn something as well. I think we'll be pleasantly surprised with the reception.
Yeah, I hope so. We're going to touch on the star forts too. Want to get into that on the show?
I think it's very important because just up until recently, I didn't even know that was a thing. I mean, it's just been a few years ago, and it turns out there's upwards of 2,000 of them, and they're incredibly huge, and there weren't machines that could cut, move, or install these types of blocks, and somehow they're everywhere, and a lot of them are underground and can be visited now, and they're fairly indestructible. What's the most noteworthy thing about the star forts that has caught your attention in your research?
Well, I think like we were talking earlier this evening, the fact that they're in places firmly, they have firm foundations in places like in the middle of water, or places that don't really make sense, indicates some sort of change in water level, sea level here, and that coincides with a mud flood and cataclysm as well. So that's, I think, a really interesting aspect. They really lend to that, I think.
That, and that most of these huge fortresses were being told that they had a military purpose. These were for defenses and for cannons, and people establishing a foothold on a land. But it seems that they have a different purpose. They may have been using energy, working with the water, possibly harvesting energy and storing it. There's many ideas. Healing, we don't really know. What do you think might be the biggest surprise if we were to be given our answer now?
Given the answer as to what it actually is, yeah, I think.
What is it really? What are they really for?
Yeah, I like the whole circuit board Earth theory, how everything was interconnected and all the energetics were harmonic. I don't think anything like sickness or anything like that would have existed in a world that was so in tune. So that's
We
a big
touched on
part
that
of
a
it.
little bit about the lack of plumbing and food service evidences in some of these large crowd World Fair photos,
Yeah,
where everyone seems, and we don't even know where they're going to go at the end of the day to have accommodations
yeah.
for the hotel. We don't really know what's going on with these people or where they came from. Maybe they'll ask us some questions about that. I'm
Mhm.
not really
The
sure.
reset people, the orphan trains, the reset people, the
Right,
yeah,
right.
moving
And
populations around. Yeah,
but I think something we mentioned earlier, we need to both be careful that we don't end up just saying so many ideas, giving so many
hmm
concepts that it may be hard for the audience to digest anything. It's
yeah.
just one new idea after another coming so quickly,
hmm
where we might be able to keep it just to the most important subjects. What
hmm
do you think we should focus on? Like, since we've kind of discussed it, where should we keep our focus together?
Guys in the chat, suggestions and a couple main topics.
Right. Right. So you've heard some of our ideas. So in the chat, maybe you could put in all caps the high point that you'd like to make sure we mention. I think I think the reoccurring melted evidence is a huge priority,
hmm
because it's something that we can all see every time we step foot out of our house. It's getting to the point where all you have to do is just look in the direction of some bushes and trees that you've been driving past all your life, and then you'll see that there's actually a giant wall back there. And then you start doing a little research with the map, and you find out, okay, it's a wall complex. And then you lead into the quarries and the golf courses and the parks and then it's, wow, what a surprise. So anyone can make simple examinations in their neighborhood if you if you're intentionally looking, if you have the time, if you're not distracted,
the underground part too.
Give yourself a minute. The underground. So there is underground in every major city. Many of them have the guided tours as a tourist attraction, where they want to show you these first story fronts, and they have all the stories about raising the city and what have you. But it seems that all the historical photos are showing a digging out of the city, a digging out of the railroads, a digging out of a lot of bridges near the rivers and canals as well. And I think you've mentioned the canal systems a bit, haven't you?
I have, yeah. That infrastructure, the narrative makes no sense on that either, and they're everywhere too, right?
I think they dig the Erie Canal in something like 8 years or something.
Something along those lines. And the narrative was the Irish came over and finished it, but the people hated them, but they still did it anyway, and it just doesn't add up. The logistics of making that happen over such a long distance and getting all the level right and getting all the labor to get all the stones. It's megalithic blockwork, right. That canal.
That's correct.
It makes no sense. It makes no sense at all.
Yeah, it's we appreciate the high quality and the lasting the work. We see that these buildings are still here. They're not falling down. In fact, one of the most, I think, it's one of the largest mistakes that people mention about why they don't build brick buildings anymore. So the normal person would say, well, they're not seismically safe. They're not. I've got an overly friendly cat that's trying to muscle in here. So they're asking us why they don't build brick structures today, and it would be because it's too dangerous. They'll fall down in an earthquake. But I'm finding that here in San Francisco, there's thousands of buildings that are pre-1906 earthquake that are perfectly fine, including maybe one of the biggest surprises that people don't mention is the San Francisco Ferry building itself at the end of Market Street, which is actually not built on land. This is built on pilings, and it's actually over the water. And this survives the earthquake, as well as so many other structures. It seems a little selective at times which buildings fall, but they certainly. Go ahead.
Well, we talked about the holes in their narrative too. You mentioned the Palace of Fine Arts and how the timeline of how they were faking that they were built with staff, but the timeline doesn't make sense. Some of those examples might be worth bringing up, I think.
I have a question for them, I believe, in that respect. So regarding the Palace of Fine Arts, so there are plenty of photos prior to the date that it was said to have been torn down, 1964, from the air. You can see the fairgrounds, the area, very high quality. I don't believe there's any photos of the building non-existent. So aerial photos after the demolition, prior to rebuilding. I don't think those photos are to be found. And I don't know of any record photos or media of the grand reopening of this structure that they took 10 years to rebuild as an exact scale replica with every single detail replicated, cannot be distinguished from the earliest photos.
That's perfect, in the 60s? They say that? 60s?
Correct. They said they knocked it down in 1964 and then spent 10 years rebuilding an absolute scale replica out of concrete this time, not staff. But I found that the archived print media from 1915 that would have been handed out to people that were attending, the very first paragraph of that publication says that the Palace of Fine Arts was made of steel and concrete and fireproof. So it was already concrete, according to their very own words. And it seems to be the very finest concrete I've seen.
Yeah, high quality. That's what we see in a lot of the old world structures. And I've seen a few examples too myself. If I recall, I think it was Wichita State House was said to have been built in the 1890s, but I have an 1865 bird's eye view with it there. I also have the
Right.
Chicago Federal Building in a bird's eye view from 98, and that was said to have been completed in 1905. So there's timeline
John
anomalies that we
Levi
haven't
had
found.
shown that picture from the panorama of San Francisco that was popular, the 1878 very, very wide panorama of a
Yes.
huge, very built out city, no people to be found, a couple donkeys walking around.
Hmm.
But he had shown, and I did some better investigating, that if you zoom in carefully in the direction of the Palace of Fine Arts, you'll actually see that it's actually in the picture.
Hmm.
It's in the picture on the horizon at the correct location. If you
Yeah.
triangulate from that location and Alcatraz, I know. So I know where the photo was taken exactly. And
Hmm.
it looks like the Tower of Jewels also standing. And some of those other bird's eye photos, the one you've seen, the bird's eye drawings that are so accurate, you're
Oh
well
yeah.
aware of.
Yeah.
Some of the ones for San Francisco are showing Fort Point with a dome.
Mm.
So they're showing structures around the Sutro Baths complex that are much more castle-like, and some much, much larger starfort-shaped structures to the south, which is right adjoining the World Fair site for Midwinter Exhibition 1893.
Yep.
So right within that proximity are amazing earthworks and geometric shapes and fascinating buildings that are said to be replicas of other world structures. So yeah, quite an amazing area to be in and be able to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we should bring these examples up. I think they're good case in points just to illustrate what we're trying to convey with our research here. Yeah.
Right. I think showing that the city fires, earthquakes, Civil War, previous wars, and some of the leading into the world wars, you can't tell the difference when you look at the photos. If you
Mhm.
show someone an example of everything I've said, and I asked you, and including the World War II Nagasaki Hiroshima photos, we got to put those in the mix too. So if you
Yeah,
hold that photo up to 1906 San Francisco, and I don't tell you which one's which, you can't either. No
that's
one
right.
can.
Same for
And then
Chicago, 1871, and Boston. Yeah, you're right. Dresden, you can throw them all in there. Yeah.
right,
And
they look the same. And then there's that phenomenon of the diagonally cut masonry walls
hmm,
that we see
like
in
something
most of the
attack from the sky, right? It looks like an attack from the sky.
it. If I was to, give my best guess, it would be um, high energy beam weapon mounted on a very high altitude platform, high enough to be undetectable from the ground. We don't know what type of technology goes on, but I do know that as growing up, it was common knowledge that most of the technology that was coming out usually had its use in the military first. And then
Hmm.
once that had been exhausted, then it would trickle down. So some examples of that are like the microwave oven and radios and Jeeps and various other products. They would find their total application militarily, and then if the public could be trusted, we get our little
Hmm.
dumbed down version.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we don't know what they're capable of. We don't really know who they are. We don't even know who they are. That's the
Hmm.
big question.
Yeah.
They're not our friends. They're not looking out for our best interests.
Yeah.
We
And we're
live in a
looking for
very
truth,
we live in
right?
an angry and fearful society. We see that. So
Hmm.
we
Yeah.
want to.
True. Truth is what all we're looking for, and we're all digging. We all have our own paths and tunnels, and sometimes our tunnels converge. They turn into hangout rooms like this.
That's right.
But
And
yeah,
it's
and
I'm really proud of the work that so many people are doing. I would
yeah,
love
me
to
too.
name everyone. I would be able to name many, but I would forget some of the most important if I tried, and I don't want to leave anyone out. But everyone is good at interacting and motivating. Just people, we even get the cheers from some. We get the thumbs ups, and that's very good. But it's not about making a name for ourselves. We want to be able to share valuable information that might actually make an actual change. If enough people realize that, wow, why are there so many lies? I mean, that's it. When there gets to be lie after lie after lie, it's usually more lies. It's really hard to trust anything when you've been duped so many times.
Yeah, we just have to care. We have to care that we're being lied to and do something about it. And say, I'm not satisfied with a comfortable lie. I'm more willing to dig for the truth, even if it is uncomfortable.
Well, I think we've got a pretty good head start. I think we wanted to keep this short, chock full of information. Were there any comments in the chat you thought you'd like to bring up real quick? Is there anything that maybe while we're maybe give everyone a couple minutes, all capitals?
Important. There were a couple back there. The fire narrative came up. I know why the lie. Somebody said why the lie. I think it's worth addressing. Yes. What else here? A lot of specific things, but like the fire narrative, there it is again. One person here, I'll put it on. Problem with staying narrow is that one rabbit hole leads to an octopus of other rabbit holes. That's true. It's hard to stay narrow.
It always does. But I wonder what's the base foundation of this deck of cards.
Yeah, right.
Can't just keep going. It's got to have a bottom somewhere.
Yeah.
Patty G, thank you.
Yeah.
And she's doing some nice presentations in her area, especially some of the. We didn't even mention the cemeteries at all, and I don't know if there's time, because that's such a mysterious subject about. First of all, the machined stonework that was being done before power tools is phenomenal. This is polished machined granite that's mirror-like and doesn't degrade over 150 years. But what's underneath the cemeteries is probably a bigger topic, but probably not this time. Meltology.
Yeah, meltology's in there.
You got somebody watching my cat. Good. My cat's watching your cat. Good. I like when people bring their cats in.
My cat was ripping around the back and moving the curtain here for a while.
That's pretty funny.
Rebecca says repopulation. Orphan trains, repopulation. Touch on it, maybe. Yeah.
That leads into where these World Fair attendees were really coming from. So were they actually gathering up their families and riding wagons for several months across the states and camping every night and trying to figure things out? Did they have that time and drive to attend, or did they come from somewhere else after a different life? Maybe one we can't explain.
Was there like a redistribution of population? Because the population boom is ridiculous. The spike in population after the American Civil War. Civil War I want to talk about too. Yeah.
Yes, and the populations grow too fast in every community. Every community, it's hard to understand how they'd be able to produce everything for that large of a population so quickly. So the Industrial Revolution also falls into this entire timeline.
Yes, where, we need to talk about that. Yeah.
Virtually every modern invention is essentially, when you look at the big picture, was just invented. Yeah. I don't think that's the way it works. We're finding relics.
Yeah, it's a timeline, right? We're going to talk about the timeline, falsification of history in the timeline. Yeah.
Right. I wonder, is it possible some of these old world photos we've been examining were developed with an AI we're not familiar with? Because I'm seeing too many anomalies with shadows and misscaled people and all these things that just, construction where the bottom floor is not really built, but they've already putting the facade halfway up, and then they've got iron, halfway. A normal person would never build that way, but an entity that doesn't really understand it would. It would, a program. But I don't know. There's no way it can know. That we can't know, because it's it's our imagination right now. Sometimes it's just our intuition, and sometimes it's the collective researchers' intuition. I'm finding syncs in the content creators pretty regularly. Some people will put together a presentation on a specific topic, and it seems like everyone is that week. You know, everyone's touching on, you know, this particular site or this I find it very interesting that or it's just that we all have so many diverse fields that we're researching that it just seems to continually overlap.
Yeah, probably a bit of both. Yeah, that's interesting.
Who has been your most influential researcher when you first started thinking about I want to look at history in a new way? Do you have a couple names that jump out at you from your earliest days?
Well, John Levi, my good friend John Levi. John and I have had a few good chats, and
I'm glad. I'm
my
hoping
jaw was
someday I would really love it if he'd come out to San Francisco and I could show him a couple of his favorite places.
yeah,
Someday.
that'd be a cool collab for sure.
Yeah.
Very early on. Him and Campbell, autodidact, Michelle Gibson. Those three early on for me were.
My research started quite a bit longer. It started maybe in 2012, and I had a lot of other research topics I was looking at, but I was very impressed with the work of Brian Forrester. He, not necessarily his ideas, all of them, but he does touch on and illustrate the use of technology to move and cut these megalithic blocks at locations all over the world. And the man's been, he's been to Machu Picchu over 60 times. This guy is the super boots. This guy's the biggest. He has the biggest boots.
I think he talks about scorching damage, heat damage everywhere as well, if I'm not mistaken.
He is looking at the idea of the softening of stone for the cutting and manipulating, and he is showing what he's calling cataclysmic damage. Yes, but he seems to be falling into the idea that this was not a recent happening. More in line with the 12,500. Yeah, there's a lot of where it seems that what we're discovering, it seems like the last episode could have been maybe as early as the mid 1700s.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. I think they're still in. Well, that's part of the education system and the lengthening of the timeline, right? If you go through the education system and you buy the historical narrative and the timeline, you have to fit it into that box rather than, discarding that and saying, okay, this doesn't make sense. So those gentlemen like Graham Hancock and Brian Forrester, I suppose they're still seeing that stretched out timeline, I think, possibly. Right. And that's part of the deception, I think.
But I think this information is really clear that we have. And I think that people that are doing other forms of research, if they just take a few minutes and just dwell with an open mind, look at some pictures. You've seen some outrageous melted building pictures yourself, and I know you have some favorites. And some of the things we see, we're not really sure. It's maybe it was, but the ones where it's literally a sideways building with bricks that are dripping, that are turning into chalk. Those ones there, it's like, what happened here?
Yeah, and academia ignores that stuff. It's like they don't even want to address it. And that's the problem.
And I think a lot of the geologists are looking for something that fits into what they were shown, but ignoring some of the obvious, because when you see bricks and mortar, or when you see mortar in the middle of an opening at the base of a giant cliff with 40 feet of so-called sedimentary material on top of it, that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, so you have to be willing to discard the filter, and that's a very difficult. That's a destabilizing event in one's life to do that, and that's why I think we don't see it all that often.
Right. Well, I think we've done well this evening. I think we'd like to ask the audience to please watch the show and to share it out. We're hoping for a very good reception. I don't know what their commercial content is during the show. I don't know if it's going to be interrupted or if there'll just be an opening or not. But from what I've seen, it's a very professional show. We've had great communication with their producers, and they've treated us very well and professional, and put together some great advertising artwork for us to share. So I think it feels great.
Yeah.
Feels like,
Yeah. Just going to quickly, before we sign off here, I have the page open. Computer being fussy. Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah. So they have it's a 24/7 talk radio show, and I don't know if they're going to allow call-ins this time. Maybe. I don't know how they work. There's really not a lot of time.
No. And then my computer's being a bit laggy right now, so
Okay.
I don't know if we're going to get it on there. Oh, there it is. Okay. So TNT Radio Live, and you'll be able to find it on the day. I think they just stream whatever's live at the moment on their main page here. So 6 a.m. Saturday morning Pacific, wherever you guys are. Hope you can tune in and see how Kairos and I do. I hope we represent the community well, and I'm looking forward to it, Kairos.
Appreciate getting a chance to meet you, and I think it's going to be a real nice presentation, and I think we're both going to support each other well, and we're going to be able to make some reasonable arguments and probably answer any question that's put our way. I don't see us being caught off guard. We've been with this too long now.
Yeah, I think we'll be all right.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, thanks for joining us here tonight on
Everyone,
this
thank you.
Live. Yeah. All right. Until next time.
Bye now.